This conference will now be recorded.
Right. What are the topics we covered? Yes, we have seen JSON formatting, XML formatting, right? So because there are two ways we can transfer the data uh, between the systems, right? How two systems can communicate each other. There are two data format, JSON, XML. So that's a two major data type they're going to use to construct the data to be passed to the another system. And when you receive the data in JSON or XML, how to do the how to work with serialization, right? So when you go for JSON string, you have seen deserialization and serialization. Okay, and we also seen XML partitioning the data, right? And constructing the XML data, right? So the way how to work with the data, how to construct the data, we have seen. Okay, so how to connect the two different systems based on uh, right the based on the rules, right? We are going to follow certain rules to connect two different systems. When you say rules, the rules are nothing but protocols. Okay, so the protocols in general, a set of rules defined by the an organization, right? We have standard rules. Okay, set of rules defined set of rules to be followed for systems, for two different systems to communicate and exchange data each other. How the two systems can communicate each other and what are the rules they need to follow. So those rules are different from protocols to protocols, right? So we have different types of protocols. We have different types of rules that can be followed to communicate and transfer the data. Maybe that data that you are going to communicate and okay, with respect to the system, the protocols are different. We have different types of protocols. We have protocols like HTTP, okay, and we have FTP, TCP, right? And we have DNS, right? IP. There are different types of protocols we have. SMTP, right? So FTP predominantly used to transfer the files, right? And your SMTP is used to transfer for mail transferring, right? Sending the email from one system to another system, right? So there are different protocols we have in general to communicate between two different systems. Okay, so among these, HTTP is frequently most popular protocol. You can say it's most a popular protocol to transfer the files, data across the internet, across the network. Okay, so that's the one we are going to see, because this is a protocol which is going to be used again to for your REST API, right? So HTTP protocol is more important protocol to understand. So it's a very popular protocol, right? Every website you are seeing is basically it's your HTTP protocol only, right? HTTPS is again another type of protocol, which is a secured protocol. You can say it's an extended version of HTTP. HTTP, okay, the data is not secured. HTTPS, data are encrypted. Data are encrypted in the case of HTTP protocols. So these are the protocols, nothing but set of rules to be followed for, okay, by the systems to communicate and exchange data each other. We'll follow this. So you're going to see what is HTTP protocol. It's an expansion, okay, it's an abbreviation of hyper text transfer protocol. Okay, we are trying to understand some basic, the main important properties of HTTP. Okay, so just touch upon the basics, right, before we get into the detailed demo, how to connect the two different systems, right? Unless we touch the basics, right, we can jump into demo. Okay, sometimes you feel like you are just following the methods and no some copy paste kind of things, right? You will follow. Of course, that you can do it, but there are sometimes you'll know you need more details in analyzing the data, in understanding the request. Okay, so and sometimes you'll also you need to compare with other protocol. So having the basic knowledge about no the protocols is important, right? So that's what we are trying to cover. We're not going to spend more time to understand about more about the protocol, but okay, some of the important factors that will help you to analyze and connect two different systems, right? In that sense, we're going to cover some important basics of HTTP protocol. So HTTP is a okay, it's an abbreviation of hypertext transfer protocol, okay, which is right, which is a protocol is also called a connectionless. Okay, it has a property stateless protocol. When you say hypertext HTTP protocol is okay, it's a property where you can define anywhere you see the definition will be uh, connectionless and stateless protocol. Okay, it's a connectionless and stateless protocol. So why do you say it's a connectionless and stateless protocol? What does it uh, mean by connectionless and stateless protocol? We have a client and we have a server. A server make a request to the as a client make a request to the server, right? So right, when you before it make a request to the server, first it has to establish it. Can you put mute someone? Right, so it establishes a connection. Okay, so the establishing connection, maybe the client has to pass user ID password, right? User ID password, or it can be a token based uh, authentication. So authentication detail must be provided, or else it can be a open authentication, okay, or it's no authentication at all, right? Sometimes the system, okay, it's a kind of public web service. We don't pass any authentication. So this depends upon the once a client is authenticated, a connection will be established, right? For example, you pass user ID password to your net banking application, then once the connection is established, okay, you can then client can send a request. Then client can send the request. Am I right? So that's way, right? For example, if you're log into your ATM application, then we use user ID password, then the connection is established, then we do the transaction, right? I'm talking about the ATM application. So similarly, right, how the client and server is connected in during HTTP, right? We establish a connection first, then make a request. Once a request is made to the server, the connection will be removed. Once a request is made to the server, okay, the connection will be removed, and the server takes its own time and process the request. The server takes its own time and process the request. So connection will be removed once a request is made. The server takes its time and process the request, and then server re-establish the connection again. Re-establish the connection again, and then any response the server is needs to send, then servants will send the response. So once a response is sent, then again the connection will be removed, right? So to okay to summarize, right? To summarize, the connection established, and once a request is made, right, from the client side, the connection will be removed, and again once a request is processed, the connection will be re-established again, then request will be made, right? Response will be transferred to the sent to the client, and then connection will be removed. So that's okay. This is a property, we call it as connectionless protocol. How do you call this property? Your HTTP is a connectionless protocol. People got this? We're trying to understand the property of HTTP protocol, a connectionless protocol. Okay, when a client is request made to the server, first the authentication takes place, or it's no authentication, but first the connection established, then request is made, then server takes its time to process the request. Once a request is processed, the connection will be re-established again. Okay, connection will be re-established again, then then response will be sent. Basically, this is what we mean as okay, a connection part. Then the response will be made. Got me? Establish a connection, request is made to the server, and then re-establish the connection, a response is made, then connection will be removed. So every time once a request or response is processed, connection will be removed. The reason it's called connectionless protocol. Got me? We'll move on to what do you mean by stateless? Right. Stateless and connectionless more are related. For example, if you take your ATM application, right? You take your ATM application. We give the user ID password, right? We give the user ID password, and right, we made some transaction. We made some transaction, right? So we draw the money, for example. Then again, you would like to do an additional transaction. So what happens in this case? You have to provide for any additional transaction. Okay, we need to provide again the user ID password. It means the request, whatever you made earlier, the user ID, password, whatever, okay, you authenticated by the server earlier, that request was completely forgotten by the server. The request was forgot. It means no state was maintained. There is no connection between the two requests. Every request is a kind of independent request. In the case of HTTP, every request is a kind of independent request. It means there won't be any connectivity between the two requests. Okay, say for example, right, a first client is trying to send a request. A client will ask, "Who are you?" Right? Who are you? Right? Then client will provide user ID password. Then the server will ask, "What type of request you need?" Okay, the client says, "I need some product details." Then server send the product details. Again, the client needs some additional product details. The client asks the server, right, "I need some more additional product details." Then again server will ask client, "Who are you?" That "who are you" questions will be there for every request. That what kind of question will be there for every request, because right, so say take for example your ATM application, every transaction you do, you have to re-enter your password, user ID password, right? You have to re-enter your PIN number, right, to make to make every request, you have to authenticate it. You should be authenticated by the server every time. So every request in the HTTP protocol is an independent request. There won't be any state is maintained. There won't be any state is maintained within the request. It's called stateless. People got this? What is connectionless and stateless? So stateless and connectionless. Okay. So connection will be reestablished every request, and there won't be any data is maintained within the request. So it's called as stateless request. You'll follow this? Right. Take an example of a connection like protocols practically. See, we made, right, a client is trying to make some 100 requests to the, okay, some 100 requests to the server, right. What happens in real time if the server keep establish the connection for all the requests, okay, for every request made by the client, right? There are n number of clients for the server, right? There are n number of clients for the server. There will be client 2. Okay, so for example, I have 10 clients trying to interact with the one server. There are 10 different clients trying to interact with the server, right? What happens if one client is trying to make 100 requests, the server keep establishing the connection to the one client, then what would happen for the, right, how the time will be allocated for rest of the client, right? So reason, the server, okay, keep remove the connections and establish the connections. That's the kind of process when okay, is happening in the HTTP protocol type of communication between the system client and the server. Okay, so right, it always re-establish the connection every time. So connectionless protocol. Okay, the time needs to be allocated, time needs to be equally allocated for, right, time needs to be shared across the resource needs to be shared. The resource needs to be shared for multiple clients. Okay, one client cannot monopolize, one client cannot hold the resource for continuous request. So in between the request, for every request, the connection will go away and re-establish the connection, right? So in order to provide a service to multiple clients, the reason HTTP is basically is called a connectionless protocol. And stateless protocol, okay, stateless protocol basically for every request between the two individual requests, the data is not maintained. Okay, whatever we passed in the one request, that cannot be retained in the another request. We cannot, okay, we cannot get back the data that we passed in the every request. Okay, that's called stateless protocol. We'll follow this. Right. The next one, what you're going to see is uniform resource identifier. Okay. So because when you take a HTTP request is a kind of URL based request. So we are trying to understand what is URL. So URL is nothing but, okay, URI is can be of two form, URI and URN. Okay, the right the URL can be of two form, URL and URN. So URLs, okay, URI is nothing but uniform resource identifier. How the resource is identified in the case of, okay, when you make a request to the server, how the resource is identified by using a unique URL, right? When you refer any web, right, any website you are referring, so that's going to be a, okay, that's going to be identified by unique URL. Okay, so in general it's called as URI. Okay, in somewhere you see like the term uniform resource identifier, and that's nothing but your uniform resource locator. Uniform resource name, okay, this is nothing but uniform resource name. Okay, instead of going with a URL, okay, like in the complete form, you'll also go with the name also. Sometimes you'll go with the name, unique name. The resource can also be identified from the server side with a unique name or uniform, sorry, it's not unique, uniform resource locator. Okay, so take an example of your uh, how to identify the okay, if you like to locate any book from the internet, right? Any like to locate any book, the book has a unique number, ISBN number. Okay, so which is nothing but right, ISBN numbers are the best examples of your to get to know, okay, to understand what is URL. Whether the URL is basically identified by the complete path name, okay, with the website name, and URN is nothing but just a name of the resource, just a name of the resource, just unique name, right? If you take the resource of the book, okay, the name of the book, right? I may have different, right? I have same in the same name, the book might be written by multiple authors. But how do I identify the a particular book? By going with the ISBN number. This is going to be unique for each and every book. Okay. So by locating the resource with the help of URN is nothing but, okay, it's again the way you locate the book with the help of unique number, which is nothing but your uniform resource name, right? Uniform resource name, right? And what we predominantly used in our okay, locating the resource in the server side based on the website web name, right? The complete web address is nothing but your uniform resource locator. So this all together we refer it as uniform resource identifier. Okay, so why we are saying this? Because when you build the request using HTTP REST API, okay, you will see the resource is identified by the method URI method, right? So these are the two terms you will find it in many places, URL or URI. Basically, URL or URI is a two different term we are going to use down the line to identify the resource in HTTP REST API methods. Got me? We'll follow this. Okay. So we'll try to understand. Okay, what is a different uh, parts of the URI? What are the different parts of URI? Right. See, for example, I have a site like this. I have site like this. So the first, okay, the first one we call it as protocol. The first part is called protocol, and this part is called host name and resource path. Okay, so the URI is basically is divided into it consists of three different parts in general. Okay, we're trying to understand how the resource is identified in the HTTP protocol, right? The resource is identified by three parts. What is a protocol, and what is a host name, and what is a resource path? So this is a main host name, right? It's a major part of the host name. Okay, we'll follow this. Okay, so this is your protocol and the host name. If you take the host name, the host name in general, it's a kind of alias name of the IP address. Okay, basically every URL will be every host name, right? Whatever website we are having, the main website domain name, right? It's nothing but host name or domain name, whatever you call it as, right? So this is going to have a particular particular IP address will be connected for this particular IP address will be connected. Okay, so but in real time we may not able to go with the IP address, right? IP address is a complex right, numerical characters. Okay, so we cannot identify the resource always with the help of IP address, right? Because we know there are a number of web address, right? Website like salesforce.com, right? Google.com, right? Every address, suppose if it is going to be identified with the IP address, which is practically impossible to recall every IP address, right? So basically your domain name is an alias of, okay, alias of your IP address, right? So that's what the host name is meant for. Host name is nothing but an alias of the IP address. So every resource is basically identified by unique IP address. Okay, so it consists of protocol, host name, which is nothing but alias name of IP address, and followed by, in this IP, what is the page you are going to request. So that page is going to be is going to be called, referred as resource path. So the URL is identified three parts in general: protocol, host name, which is nothing but a domain name, and which right, in general it's a alias name of the respective IP address. The IP address is going to be unique for every resource, and slash by, okay, if any particular page you are requesting from that what resource you are requesting from that IP is going to be your resource path. We'll follow this, right? Okay, right. So we'll move on to try to understand how the request and response is built between the two systems. So basically, if you take a HTTP way of communicating, we have a client, we have a server. Okay, so HTTP, okay, by using HTTP protocol, right? When you communicate with the two different systems, we communicate in terms of request and response model. How we are going to communicate? We request something to the server, and we get a response from the server. So okay, so we communicate between the two different systems in terms of request and response model, right? Request and response model. So okay, when you send the request, what type of information you are going to send? What type of information you are going to send from the client? Okay, so in order to understand, right, so that, right, when you see it practically, you know what you are going to build, right? From the Salesforce, suppose you are going to send request to any third party system, right? So what type of data you're going to send, that's more important to construct your request, right? To build your request. And when you get the response, then, right, as a client, you should know how to process the response, right? How will you process? Only if you know what type of content, what type of data will be there in the response, right? So why you are talking about this? Because everything is going to be happen by a set of rules, right? So you're going to understand what are the format of the request, what are the format of the response, because we are going to everything you are going to, okay, every communication is going to happen based on some protocols, some set of rules, right? So what type of protocol we are seeing? HTTP protocol. So in the case of HTTP protocol, how the request is built, how the response is built, right? What type of data I can share to the server, what type of response I get from the server. So this is more important to understand, okay, in order to build the request, right? In case if you like to send a request to the server, okay, and how to process the response from the server. So we need to understand what are the data I can, okay, I can use, I can see in the request, okay, what are the protocols I follow, right, to build to read the response, right? So we'll try to understand. we just start with the request. Okay, request message. How the request message will be looking like. When you say request message, it's going to be divided into three different parts. It's going to be divided into three different parts. The first line, okay, the first line is going to be called as request line. How do you call this? The first part is going to be called as request line. There are three different parts, okay? Request line. So we'll see, okay, what are the data will be, okay, will be this first line is going to have, right? We are trying to understand how the request message will be. We are trying to understand how the HTTP request message is going to have. What are the data the request message is going to have? The first part of the message you are going to have you call it as a request line, and then you are going to call it as request header. The second part you are going to call it as request header. So this part is going to be called as request header. So this is going to have a different types of data. I just make it as just a letter, the first letter of the header, but we are going to see in detail what are the type of data it's going to have. And there will be a blank line. Okay, this is nothing but a blank line will be have, which is going to separate request header, okay, request header and the body. So body is the optional one. Body is the optional one. Okay, if in case if you are like to send any a data to the server, then we have the body. Okay, in case if you are like to send the data to the server, then you are going to have the body. So body is optional, but mandatory part of your HTTP request message is going to have a request line and request header. So what are the things the request header and request line is going to have? You see here, you can go any of the general website trying to understand what is, okay, what the HTTP request consists of, right? Right. If you see here, uh, okay, you can also take this as an example. Right, it's divided into okay, the request HTTP request as a request line excuse me, request line, request header, and then it's going to have a the body. Just 1 minute, ma. Let's go to the okay, the Google request format message. Okay, go to the image and explain you the things. Okay, you can see here. Okay, you can see here. Maybe you can see here. Opening the image, right? I'm just trying to open the image. Okay, so the first line, right, what we discuss is nothing but the request line, and then we have a request header, then we have blank line, then you'll have a request message body, right? The first line, request line, consists of three different parts. The request line consists of three different parts. Okay, one is what is the protocol? Okay, what is the protocol you are using? Which protocol? Okay, and then the next is going to have a the next is going to have a the URI, request URI. So what is the system you are going to request? Okay, what is the resource you are going to request? Then you are going to have the HTTP version. So what is the version you are going to request, right? There are different types of the HTTP version. Okay, so which version you are going to request? See here. So okay, get, there are some, okay, the URI is going to be requested. Okay, that path alone is given here, the path. Okay, so get is a type of method. Okay, so it's not protocol, it's a request method. So it's a request method. It's going to have a three parts more. One is the request method, and another is the request URI, and third thing is a version. For example, okay, if you take this example, we have a get method, okay, and then a dot, right, test and something HTML page. And what is the version of the HTTP, right? What is the version of the HTTP? Taken version 1.1. Okay, so what type of request you are making to the server? So that's going to be having the request line. Okay, so this get is nothing but we are going to see what the different types of request method we have in the HTTP. Later we'll see. This get request nothing but we are trying to read some information from the server side. We are going to read. We are not going to update anything. Okay, we are not going to update anything. We are not going to delete anything. We are need some data from the server side. So reason they are making, okay, they are having a get request. So by seeing the request body, a request line, we can understand what type of request you are made to the server, and what is the resource path, and what is the HTTP version. Okay, that's the one you are going to have in the request header, right? In case if Salesforce is going to receive some request from the server, right, is going to receive the request from different other third-party system, then then it's our, okay, we can read the request line and we can come to know what type of request the server, right, the third-party system is made to us, whether it's a get request or post request or delete request. Okay, and what resource they need and which type of HTTP version they mean for. So okay, so all those three different information you will find it in the request line. You will follow this. So what is request header? Request header is going to have a different other information, but here, okay, these are the more important information, because but in general the request header is going to different other information as well, right? What are the important informations we have? Host name. What is the complete host name? Suppose if I'm making a request to the okay, a website, some Visualforce pages, what is the host name? Your request, okay, your request header is going to have host colon the domain name. Okay, that's the one thing is going to have. And next, what type of what type of data, okay, what type of data we are requesting, okay, it's a kind of image or any type of document. Okay, what type of data? It can be image or HTML document. whatever that image, that acceptable format. Okay, the request, what type of data can be requested, can be acceptable from the server side. That's going to be a accept colon the data type, right? The data in general is called MIME type, right? You heard about MIME type. The data type, basically multi-purpose internet mail extension. Okay, it's a data type we are going to refer here. And what is a language? Accept language. What is the encoding format? Right? That those are the details you will find it in the request header. Okay, and on which browser you are making this request, whether it's a Mozilla or Internet, right, or Internet Explorer or Google Chrome. So that type of agent, which browser we are using to make this request. Okay, and what is the total length of the content, right? These are optionally. And then if you are sending any data to be write into the server, then this will have optionally. Okay, in the case of get request, basically, okay, if you're suppose I'm requesting any a page, okay, based on some unique number. Okay, you pass the unique number, you get that particular page. You pass the page number and get that particular page. In that case, you'll also pass the ID here. Okay, got me? Suppose I need some details of a particular place, then I need to pass the pin code number. Then I will pass a body here. Other cases, this is optional, right? This is optional basically. So basically, the HTTP request has three different parts: request line, request header, and request body. We'll follow this. And what is request line? Request line is going to have what type of request you are made to the server, whether it's a read request or write request or delete request, and then what is the resource path and what is the HTML version, right? HTTP version. And then next to the second line, right, you are going to have a request header. Request header is going to have a host name, what is acceptable for data format, language, encoding, okay, and the browser type from where you are making the request, and separated by blank line, you are going to have a body optionally. Okay, right? Some basic information about how the HTTP request message looks like. We'll follow this. It's clear to all of you. There are four different parts. Your URL as, right? Protocol, host name, and port. Port is optional. Port is nothing but, see here, the URL, when you go with the URL, we have port number for every protocol. We have a defined port number for every protocol. Okay, you can see here we have a port number for okay, we have a port number, unique port number is assigned for every protocol. HTTP as 80, okay, and your HTTPS is 443 basically. If you see here, this is HTTPS protocol, right? So next to the host name, there will be a protocol. Sorry, a port number will be suffixed with the colon, right? I give 443, hit enter, it automatically resolve to website. It's a default port number will be there for every request you are making, right? For the protocol, with respect to the protocol, we have a port number. Okay, that's what they mentioned here.
Ranjith, if you don't mind, can you report that port number? Actually, I didn't get what you.
I'm going to repeat. Hold on, that's what I'm trying to explain now. Okay, so this is my client. Okay, and this is my server. So when you make any request, right, from which port you are making the request? Okay, so right, the server has different types of a port. Okay, a server has a different types of port. So when you make a request from the port 80, right, then server, a corresponding port will open the gate. Okay, so the communication will happen between the two port, right? So basically, okay, there are defined port number. There will be unique port number for every protocol we have. Unique port number. For HTTP, we have 80. Okay, for HTTPS, we have port number 443, which is a defined number. You need not suffix that number in your web address. It's a by default it will be taken. Your HTTP, okay, the port number HTTPS is basically 443. So which is need not be explicitly mentioned here, but a protocol will be assigned with a unique port number. Okay, the request is okay will made to the server with respect to the port number, and we can also define our own port number also apart from defined port number. But every protocol will have its own port number, which is not mandatorily need to be specified in the next to the host name. Okay, I give the 443 and hit enter, which is automatically resolved. Okay, it's not mandatory to be explicitly specified, right? Why did you give that information? When you read the any HTTP request, you'll also see, okay, it consists of 4 different parts, right? They also mentioned like port number is also one of the part in the URL. Okay, port number also you will see in the request. HTTP request, you also see the port number also sometimes. Which means okay, the port number with respect to the HTTP with respect to the protocol. Nothing but the port number will be assigned uniquely for every protocol. Your telnet has different port number. Got me? The port number is nothing but a number assigned to the a particular a gate, right? The gate of okay, where the because the client may request different types of process, different type of request, right? Different type HTTP, SMTP, different type of request, different type of protocols a client may made, and each protocol will have its own unique port number. It's a kind of okay, it's a kind of gate communication. Open this gate, and corresponding a port will be okay, will be opened in the server side. Got me? Okay, we are trying to understand some overview of the things. Okay, get into the much more detail may not give much scope for your okay, for your to understand the building the web services, but trying to understand what is this and why you are using this, right? Where it is used. That's it. That type of right. That type of questions and answers we are trying to find, right? That's it. Okay, don't get into much detail about each and every individual information that basically will deviate you to a different other direction, right? Which is not necessary. I'm trying to give some important things, okay, so that you can understand when you build the request, when you connect the two different systems, you just okay, your whatever you have, each and every lines in your right, establishing the connection, the codes, you will have some clarity on the right, whatever parameter you're going to use when building the request. Okay, that's what you are trying to understand, right? Let's try to understand what is a HTTP response format. HTTP response format. Okay, you can see here, right? The response as three different part, right? Again, it's similar to that. The first line, okay, earlier we call it as a request line, right? We call it as request line. How we are going to refer this now? Okay, so response. The first line is going to be called status line. This is not the request line. It's called as a status line. The first part of the message is going to be called as status line. Right? The next thing is going to be response header. So there you called as request header, you called as here response header. Okay, and then you have a body. So next to this request header, then with a blank line, your body and the request header will be separated. Will follow this, right? What is the okay data the request status line is going to have, right? Listen, see here is going to have a this part, right? So one is okay, say for example, this is what you are going to have. Okay, this is going to have the two parts. One is HTTP version. Okay, HTTP version. So where you get the response from the server, right? So when from the server you get the response, is going to have two parts in the first part of the message. The response message, right? The response HTTP response. So how the response, the content looks like. The first part is going to have a status line, which is nothing but the HTTP version and status code. Status code, and then status token. Okay, status code token is nothing but whether it's okay or failed or whatever, right? There are three different parts. The status line is divided. Okay, your HTTP version. What is the HTTP version you're using? Maybe it's a right. It's a 1.0 or 1.1. Okay, like this. And the second one is going to be you're going to have a status code. Okay, we have anything starts from 2 and 3 digits. Okay, it's basically it's meant for whether successful or not. And okay, anything say 404, say like a page not found, right? So by reading this first line from the response, right, you come to know whether the request whatever you made to the server is successful or not. Okay, is successful or not. Okay, if it is not successful, what was the reason? That can be read by the third qualifier, right? The third part of the status line. Okay, so why it is so important to understand? Because when you made any request to the server, you get the response, then you know how to read the response, right? You know how to read the response, you know what type of data we get in the response. The first line says whether the request is successful or not. Okay, and what is the message? Okay, what is the corresponding a token for that status code, right? We have different types of predefined status codes. We have different types of predefined status code we have. Okay, so some of the status code, say 1xx, it means what? 100 101. Okay, any message start from 100, it's just an informational message. For example, whether it's a request is received. Okay, whether it's a request is received or processing. So such type of messages. 2xx, right? We have given here 200, right? So it's a kind of example. Whether it's a success, all the success message. For example, successfully received. The token will be like a successfully received. Okay, the meaning of that message, successfully received, or okay, it's understandable, understand, accepted. So such type of, right? So 200 means what? 200 means okay, right? Like this. And 3xx, the message can also have started with the number 3, okay, 3-digit number. So sometimes a request you made to the one resource will be redirect to another resource, okay, such type of redirect status, right? What about 4xx? What about 4xx? Whether any error, right? For example, here 404 says is a page not found, okay, so it means the request is failed and some issue with the uh, right. A blank line is basically, it's a format how the request header and body is separated. Okay, in just a blank line, we have to separate request header and body. It's happening in both the request as well as response. Okay, the blank line is always be there to separate. That's a format, right? That's a format of the message. Okay, and server error. So basically, your 4 is basically a client error. It means what? The page what we send is an incorrect page. Okay, the fourth one will show you the client error, and anything, any number, okay, any status code start with 5 is basically some issue on the server. Maybe server is not up, okay, server is down, server is no more, okay. So such type of request, such type of code. So by seeing the first status line in the response, you'll come to know all these informations. You'll follow this. Everyone good with this? And what about the, right, what about the second information, header, right? Basically, okay, when the response is sent, what type of server, right? And okay, and the content length, the connection is closed, and what type of data you requested. So all those information you'll have it in the response header. And then your body is going to have a, what is the data you're going to, okay, you're going to you requested from this, or what is data is returned. So those things, right? For example, I request for any HTML page, so that's the content of the page, right? That's page, the body is going to be having the right, in the response body. Okay, suppose in my Salesforce, right, I'm just I need some okay, some payment info, some customer details. I send the customer ID to the some Oracle system. I get all the customer details, name, phone number, all those things, right? So you are going to have a customer details here, okay, and you are going to have a what is the status of the request, whether it's successful, and the status token, and then you're going to have other details here, the header. That's it. Okay, to which system, right? You made the request, on what date you made the request, and all those information you'll have here. Got me? So your request and response message format we have seen. We'll follow this response and request message. So we got some quick introduction idea about okay, what HTTP protocol is, what HTTP protocol is, and okay, what are the important parts of your URI. Okay, it's also called URL, right? And then we have gone through okay, what is the, okay, what is the format, how the request and response messages consist of, right? It consists of different parts, right? So what is the request message, HTTP request, and response consist of, in order to understand how we can process the request, how we can process the response, right? So as a Salesforce may behave as a client, a Salesforce may behave as a server. Okay, there are two different role a system may take, right? A Salesforce may behave as a server, sometimes a Salesforce behave as a client. Okay, so third party will behave as a server, right? Okay, in both the cases, okay, you need to understand how to process the request, how to process the response. Okay, so to process that, you need to understand what are the type of content the request and your response will have. Got me? So that's what you're trying to understand here, just to have an overview of okay, the format of the messages, because your HTTP basically works based on request and response model.